Don't you feel good? A little tingly all over. It's not just the Christmas lights in the room that do that, although that too awakens your inner joyfulness, I'm sure. That's what it does for me, to see our Christmas lights in the sanctuary so beautifully decorated. So this morning, we are in week 3 of our holiday series with the Christmas story, what is also known to be called the infancy narratives, where we are openly exploring the traditional story of Jesus' birth and given permission to question it at every level. We are on this 360-degree journey so that each of us have the opportunity to consider what it is we think to be true and what it is we believe about the infancy narrative in the Christian culture. And I do this with you purposely so that when we come together at Christmas Eve, we have a conscious awareness of what it is to celebrate the birth of the Christ. Because the birth of the Christ is our story. And so our exploration has been guided by the work of the prophets that cover hundreds of years and are written by multiple hands. These Bible stories are, in Unity's tradition, the story of our human evolution and how we have had relationship and understanding with what it is to know God. And so we understand that these scriptural writings were created to be heard by a people long ago and not in our cultural time of 2016. And we absolutely know that there is wisdom in these stories, or they would not have lasted all these centuries. As we began our series, we talked about the Christ and what it is to be the Christ in the world. Last week, we focused on Joseph, and it was not so much his lineage from the house of David that was important, but that metaphysically he represents to us spiritual understanding. Understanding is one of our 12 powers as taught by Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, and it is the attribute of understanding, standing firmly on solid ground on our beliefs and our intuitive guidance to help us grow through our life's journey. It is knowing that our mental and emotional maturity that we utilize and come from in our life must come from a place of spiritual understanding. This week, we focus on Mary. Knowing, as I've said multiple times now, the infancy narratives was created not because it is true, but because it fulfills the words of the prophets. That is all. So the character Mary, obviously in any thinking mind, has this challenge to overcome, and in my mind, one of them is the virgin birth concept. And the other one would be why it was she and what does she represent in order to be the chosen one to birth this Christ child. So whether or not you believe in the virgin birth is not part of what has created all of the controversy, like we think. Because when we get to the end of our time together, you will understand what it is to be a virgin in mind and heart. And so created was the story that Jesus was born of a virgin. Many, many cultures in the world have a virgin birth story in their history, or a miraculous story of some sort that is tied to their spiritual leaders. These miracle birth stories include miraculous circumstances regarding intervention by a deity or supernatural experiences, astrological signs, or hardship. Sometimes, in case of mythology, there was a complex plot as a part of the story. In the birth story of Jesus, the most closely related birth story of another culture is the Egyptian mythology and the birth story of Horus. When you compare these two stories together, there is so many similarities. You could think they were almost identical. Other cultures have similar stories, such as the Greco-Roman and the Hellenistic literatures, the Iranian literature of religion, the East Indian mythology, the Assyrian and Babylonian myths, and of course, Roman mythology. I loved that class in middle school. Other world religions also have unusual birth stories as found in Buddhism, Taoism, and Hinduism. And of our three Abrahamic faiths, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, there exists not just one, but multiple miracle birth stories. And so the birth of Jesus is really nothing more than a borrowed and repetitive theme to emphasize the purity of the child who is to become a leader. Because don't forget that the story of the birth is created after the leadership experience. And so it's all the curiosity by the people. How did they get that way? How did they learn these things? How did they become so smart? It's the curiosity of the people that inspires these stories to be created as time goes by. So in the 3rd century BCE, 70 Jewish scholars translated the 5 books of Moses, which are the 5 books of our Bible, into Greek. And in their work, they recognized that the Hebrew word Alma actually translates as a young woman of childbearing age who had not yet given birth and who may or may not be a virgin. So, any of you women in the household know that you can be pregnant and not give birth for a variety of reasons. The Hebrew word, and I may not be pronouncing this correctly, Betula means virgin, but that was not the word that was translated to fit this story. So, this was shared in the book Jesus Gate by Ernie Bringus. I love that name, Jesus Gate. And what his philosophy is when you're exploring all the multiple miraculous births of all these religious and faith traditions, he simply said, supernatural births are in vogue, just like a style of shoe. So, depending on your style of shoe, you may be in vogue or not. And whether or not your philosophy has a virgin birth or a immaculate conception was all about whether or not your leadership was in with the times, I guess. I don't know. But in both the Gospel of Luke and Matthew, these are the 2 Gospels that declare that Jesus was begotten not of Joseph, but by the Holy Spirit, while Mary was still a virgin in fulfillment of the prophecy. Many scholars have taken doubt about this level of truth or teaching and taken their skepticism out into the public and openly questioned these teachings. One who I found information on was Leslie Dixon Weatherhead, an English Christian theologian of the liberal Protestant tradition. And he believed that Jesus Christ was, are you all sitting? Good. He believed that Jesus Christ was the bastard son of Zechariah, who was Mary's cousin, Elizabeth's husband, John the Baptist's father. And that Mary, I'm so glad you're all sitting, was technically a prostitute of the temple. Can you imagine how his theory was received? My research did not say that he was tarred and feathered, and he lived to a ripe old age of 83. But the commentary about his philosophy said that this was as vile a thing as anyone could say. It takes some breathing into, don't you think? So in following the research, there's not just one, but a number of scholars that have very viable evidence of spiritual and sacred practices that actually could lead to the birth of a child in the name of religious practice and sacred ritual. So, it's not entirely impossible. But on the flip side to that, there are also modern scholars that suggest that the relationship between Mary and Elizabeth was a story made up by the gospel writer of Luke. And you may recall that last week I shared that this same gospel writer was accused of creating the story of the census because we knew it happened like a few centuries later and not in the time of Jesus' birth. So the whole getting Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem was not really entirely true. So, of course, he would be the culprit. That gospel writer of Luke did it. And so in the 1st to 5th century, in a culture of illiterate peasants, there is these oral traditions and stories that are shared. Who would follow the details? The Gospels are not written because it happened. They are written to fulfill the prophecies. The details did not matter, nor were they questioned. So this young woman, known to us as Mary, needed this veil of purity from the very beginning. And unfortunately, thanks to written records, we know that they did not think of that right away. Also in Jesus Gate by Ernie Bringus, he points out that in the early writings, there was no mention of the virgin birth in the early teachings of Christianity as shared by the Apostle Paul, or in the first chronologically written gospel that we know to be the Gospel of Mark. There was great skepticism in the Greek translation from young woman that we now see as a part of the story as the word virgin. In addition, the most notable Jewish publication called the Jewish Annotated New Testament states that the young woman is pregnant. There is no reason to presume her pregnancy is miraculous. Oh, busted, big time. By more than one scholar, multiple scholars in multiple venues. And so the scholars, using rules of investigative analysis as applied in all the disciplines, are prone to conclude that the virgin birth is historically improbable. They now call this study Mariology. Who knew it had a name? I didn't. Many of the details that are not included in the Bible for Mary began to be created in the expanding traditions as the centuries evolved. And so especially in the 2nd century, drastic changes were made to the Mary story, including stories about her birth. And also that in her preteen years, at the age of 12, she was learning in the temple with the scholars. And anyone who knows anything about Eastern male and female roles in life can probably doubt that to be true. Educating young women in that part of the country is something that we as a human planet are striving for today, let alone prior to Jesus' birth. So another change was decided upon. And this one was that Mary was not only a virgin when Jesus was conceived, but she would remain one until her death. So by the 4th century, the leading Christian writers condemned people as heretics, even though the Gospel of Luke says that Jesus was Mary's firstborn son. And that gospel writer lists brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas, as well as sisters in the Gospel of Matthew. So here is the story where he has siblings, but yet it was denounced because how could he have siblings if she were a virgin till her death? Many believe that she and Joseph had a regular married life and had children and raised a family together. So by the time the 5th century came around, the debate centered not only about her virginity, but about whether she should be called the mother of Christ or the mother of God. And in the year 431 AD, it was decided that she now was the mother of God. Wow. That's a pretty heavy-duty thing. Metaphysically, thank God, we know in Unity and the New Thought circles that Mary represents the divine feminine and the power of love. She needed a Joseph representing the divine masculine as protector and the faculty of mind to give us spiritual understanding. Love, represented by Mary, must be united with this spiritual understanding in order to birth forth the wisdom that seeks expression in our lives. In order to make the right use of a divine idea, love must be present to nurture that idea. So Mary represents in us our deep intuitive side. Myrtle Fillmore was a firm believer in intuition. And so I see these feminine gifts of intuitiveness as a pure essence of all of our souls, regardless of the gender we are born into. The inspiration of God came to Mary and Joseph alike. It came through love and spiritual understanding. So Mary represents the nurturing aspect of our soul, the part of us that is devout and expectant of our good to come into our lives and the lives of our loved ones. The portion of our soul that is comfortable in sitting and listening in the silence, so that we may experience a spiritual quickening and awaken and utilize our intuitive nature. All of these things must be in place so that we are prepared when life presents a challenge. We need to be prepared when those challenges come because we typically do not have advance warning. In a moment's notice, we must stand firm in our faith, in our belief, in our spiritual understanding. Typically, our biggest growth challenges catch us off guard, do they not? Those big challenges also become part of our greatest gift in our personal learning, in our growth, and in the life that we share with others. Because we have overcome some challenge. So the most important thing for us to know is that when we awaken to the possibility and potential that we bring into the world by nurturing our Christ presence, by bringing together understanding and love, so that we too may birth a Christ in our experience, it's our gift to the world, just as Mary presented a gift in the child of Jesus to the world. So part of your homework this week is to ask yourself, what gift do I bring to the world? What part of spirit is being revealed to symbolize the aspect of your soul expressing its true nature in your environment, in your circle of influence? Because each and every one of us are ready and able to birth such a divine aspect of ourselves, so big, so great, so powerful that our human minds cannot comprehend what it is or how it will impact not us, only ourselves, but others. Each one of us has that within us, just as Mary and Jesus did. As with Mary, that divine idea that is planted within must be nourished with love. And so it speaks to the tradition that Mary was a virgin not by reason of just an unmarried state, but that she was a virgin in mind and heart. It was a virgin state of consciousness, a spiritual level of purity, of sacredness when she lived her life. That is why she was chosen. She was living a pure life. She was faithful. She was open and accepting of God's presence active in her world each and every day with every single breath. And so when the angel came to her and said, "Embrace this divine idea, allow it to unfold in your life, awaken your consciousness," that is the true story of the meaning of Mary. That Mary state of consciousness remembers that gifted to you is all the love and creativity you need to stand firmly in your life, filled with faith. So when we know this truth for ourselves, our spirit, our soul rejoices. Our Christ presence is open and aware. People see it in you by the spark in your eye, the skip in your step, the smile in your face, the love you exude. That is the gift. And so then the Virgin Mary symbolizes spiritual quickening of your intuition and our emotional nature. It's a non-negative state. And what I mean by that is there's an absence of resistance to the truth of your being. You know, when someone says, "Hi, who are you?" Do you say, "Oh, I'm the Christ"? No. I've not said anyone introduce themselves to me this way here, or at other places for that matter, very few. And so as you go out into the world, claim your innate divinity, introduce yourself as your truth with all of the faith that you are, with all of the divine idea that you are able to express, and trust Do not resist your true nature. God always bubbles up, oozes out, and explodes into the environment. It is when your spiritual awareness has overtaken you and has come here to stay that we see the Christ presence alive and well in you. Allow for that to unfold in your life. Bless yourself and all of us. Namaste.